Okay, so hello, welcome everyone. This is the November meetup, parent meetup. And for this month's topic, we're happy. This is a good topic because actually I've been getting some questions from some parents that aren't necessarily on the call about this. And I thought this would be a good topic to discuss just so that people can have more information about this. Basically, the topic for this month is how abilities commonly present themselves at each age. And so what I wanted to point people to is actually there was a blog post that was put out today that actually supports this as well. And it talks about the different stages of development for highly intuitive kids and what to expect. Because as a parent, when you don't understand what's happening with your child and you don't understand when they're sensing things or how they're reacting, or if your child sees, because not every child who has intuitive abilities is clairvoyant or sees something. They may just feel or sense or know things, and that's still intuitive abilities. And parents don't always put that together and understand that it can come in different forms and look different ways. And so today we're just going to talk about that in general and answer any questions and just have a dialogue on it. So with one of the things that for people to understand, and I always say, is that, everybody has intuitive abilities. Everyone does. It's just some people have it to a heightened degree, intuitive and empathic abilities. They have it to a heightened degree. And that's where, people refer to it as like psychic abilities, intuitive abilities. But it's just something that kids from the ages of 0 up until 7, 8 years old just are naturally fully connected to it, and they will and just naturally experience and live in that type of inner world. And so for them, it's normal and feels comfortable for them to have these experiences. And for parents who aren't familiar with them, they may not know how to take it, and they may wonder what's going on and why are they talking to people that aren't there, or why are they saying they're feeling this way or sensing this way, or why do they react certain ways. And so that's one of the things that we just wanted to kind of talk about and go through the stages of development, just get feedback from the folks who are here, and just talk about it in general. So I think one of the first things for talking about stages of development, kids start with the youngest, the first stage. In the blog article that just went out, it discusses like the 6 different stages. But kids as young as parents may notice things from kids as young as when they're born. I know when they're infants, newborns. I know for our son, we could tell something. He started sensing energy when he was a baby, because he would go to some people and he wouldn't cry, and then he would go to others and he would cry. Or we'd take him in certain environments and we wouldn't know why he would cry or react a certain way. But as time went on, and we didn't know until later, he was actually sensing all the energies around him. And so we had to figure that out. We had to start trying to figure that out. But from about 2 to 3 years old, that's like the first stage. Kids, what you may notice is that, and what we noticed with our son, is that he started around the age of 2, he started having past life memories and remembering, telling us about events of what had happened to him before he was born. He came in remembering a scenario where he woke up, he would wake up panic when he'd hear emergency vehicles. And then we asked him one night, he was calm, and he finally started opening up and talking about it. And he said that he told us that there were these bad men, and he was only about 18 months. He had just started talking, didn't watch TV, so he had no frame of reference for this. These bad men were chasing him, and they chased him into a building, and the building was on fire. And that when he went in there, he said he died. He said his body died, but he didn't. And that his dad and I were there, but we weren't his mom and dad. We were other people. And when he died, he went to the nowhere place, and he waited for us in that nowhere place. And he said, I waited to come back to you, and you guys took a long time to get together, which he was talking about in this lifetime. He came back, he was waiting to come back to be our son. And we were just kind of sitting there with our mouths on the ground because we were just like, oh my gosh, what is he telling us? We hadn't thought about this or heard about this. And it was just amazing to us. And so I was going to ask if, anyone else, Crystal, did you have past life experiences with your child?
So I knew Memphis was different, and I couldn't pinpoint what I meant by the word different. But Memphis, by the time he was 6 months old, he was different than my other children. And it was, looking back, he sensed things differently. He was highly sensitive to the energy somewhere. And it was to the point is, as he grew between that age and 2, it was, if he didn't like the energy somewhere, he wanted to go home. And if you weren't ready to go home as a baby, he would try to leave and go home without you. So you had to watch him. So we used to have, and at the time, not knowing, we used to have to pack like his special pillow and his special blanket. And when he was, in a situation where he didn't want to be there and he'd say, it's time to go home, you'd try to comfort him with, his comfort things from home. And it would only buy you 10, 15 minutes before he was pushy. Let's go home. Okay, finally, you picked up on his clues. And then I don't remember, and I don't know if it's because I had 3 babies in 2.5 years, but I don't remember his imaginary friend. My mom does, my husband does. And that I don't remember. Memphis has, as he's gotten older, has opened up more about his past lives. He seems to talk to me more about them on random evenings. About 10 p.m. is when he really wants to chat. He's told me that I've been in his past lives. My oldest son, his brother, that they were been brothers before, that they had different parents. They lived in a red house. They shared a bedroom. He's pretty sure they're from California.
Wow.
He's got and this one was really concerning, and I reached out to Luann because it really actually freaked me out when he told me about it. He has a guy that is around him all the time, and his name's Rob. And he had mentioned that Rob could get very dark and heavy. And when Rob gets dark and heavy, he shuts him out. I was concerned. I'm like, what kind of energy is following you that can get dark or heavy? And he told me that Rob is from a past life. And Memphis felt guilty, and he got very emotional. This was about a year ago. He told me about this. He got very emotional, telling me that him and Rob died together, and Rob was upset because Memphis came back, and Memphis felt guilty because he came back and Rob didn't.
So let me ask you, Crystal, you said this was just a year ago. So he was interacting with Rob as recent as he is his age now, as he is.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Rob was just a couple weeks ago, he told me he's seen Rob.
Okay.
So I was again, I don't have the abilities Memphis has. So I was like a deer in the headlights, and I felt he was so emotional. I felt broken because I felt like he experiences a world that I can't protect him from.
And let me ask you, so, because this is interesting, this is why it's good to talk about and have these conversations, because most kids over time, these memories will fade, but some will hold on to their connection to their past lives. And with you saying that, see, Ethan, it was about 2 years ago, right when the pandemic hit, Ethan started having similar discussion about past lives, and he started bringing up memories about an energy that was his dad in a previous lifetime that was connecting with him. It was like this energy was coming back to him now. And I started asking him, and that's one thing, is just parents can be open, and like what you did, Crystal, just ask questions and let them share. Because I started asking him, well, what did the dad look like? What was he wearing? Just what did you notice about the dad? Just to get him to talk and see if we could place it. But he started telling me about this dad, because it was the same thing, Crystal. this dad had kept him in a dungeon, and him and his brothers and sisters in this previous lifetime, but he had a what is it called? Like not a hammer, but like this gavel thing with spikes on it. And the more he started talking about it, I was like, okay, you're talking medieval time. We're going back. So he started giving some details around it, but he couldn't shake this energy. It was coming to him, and it was telling him, it was scaring him, because this father from that lifetime, and actually he was telling us, had killed him, and he had like 9 brothers and sisters, and killed his brothers and sisters. And he was talking all this, and we're sitting here like, okay, this is different. But we knew, because of his abilities, this wasn't imaginary. And so
Right.
we actually had to go, we talked to Pat Longo
Okay.
about what was going on with Ethan, and she did a past life regression to help clear this energy, to break the cord and clear the energy. And after she did that past life regression, it went away. He never had that again. But it was right before school was going to start. And I was like, we have to get this handled before he goes to school, because people are not going to understand what's going on with him. But that's where parents have to know your child, know that this is, if they have this high intuition that this is real, and then just find ways to work with them. So is Memphis still experiencing Rob now?
Yes. So what I did was I reached out to Luann and I explained to her, and she said, "Well, let's meet up." So we met up, and she's talked him through things. She's never done anything intuitive or mediumship with him, but she talks him through what it is he experiences, and I think it helped him understand. Like, it's not Rob didn't come back and you did. It's Rob didn't choose to come back, and that's not your fault. And it's understanding who Rob is, and that he hangs around, but he's not a negative energy at all. And so I asked Memphis when he originally told me about Rob, and I think it was probably about February is when I found out about Rob, maybe around that time. And I asked, what's he look like? How's he dress? And he described him to a T. I mean, described everything about him. And he sounded like one of my dad's past friends.
Wow.
And said, okay. Well, it just so happened, a funny thing is I went to a group reading in August. And so this friend of my dad's was my dad's best man at his wedding. He's my godfather. And he's been gone since 2017. We came through during a reading I had, and it was a group reading. So, she just told me some things, and it was funny. He said, you think it's your grandmother watching over you, kid, but it's me. And everything we talked about, like, I'm still not understanding how Robin, this guy's name's Wes, are not the same people. But Memphis, I've showed Memphis pictures, and I'm like, without saying anything, I'm like, does this guy look familiar to you? And he said, no. Is that Wes? And that's what he said to me. And I said, yes. And he was like, okay. And that was it. So he said, it was September. It was the end of September, and he came home. I went to Salem with my girlfriend and Presley, and Memphis went racing with my husband, and they came home, and he had to run back out to the motorhome for something. And he came running back in, he shut the door, and he was like, Rob was out there. And I was like, in the motorhome? He was like, yeah, he scared me. He was like, I just ran out there to get something out of the motorhome fridge, and I opened the door, and he's like, hey, kid. And he's just checking in on him. It's not often he sees him, but I think it was a heavy period. I'm not sure what was going on with Memphis for him to see him back in like February or whatever, that really brought it up. And I think the conversation started with, I asked Memphis, does he have spirit guides? And he didn't know what I was saying. And I said, well, normally from what I've heard is people who have abilities like you have spirit guides who help guide them through these experiences. And he said, well, I have Rob. And I was like, well, who's Rob? And that's how I found out about who Rob was.
Wow. And see that's good that you are open and talking to him about that. And that's what a lot of parents need to understand and know. And like when you were mentioning about spirit guides, that actually comes in like with the next stage and up, like 3 to 5 years old. Like you were talking about, they can sense that energy, and that's when kids will start interacting with departed loved ones, spirit guides, angels. They'll start feeling those energies around them. And so, and that's why it's wonderful that you're in having that conversation with them. And what I want parents to also know is at that age, starting from 3 to 5 and up, is having that conversation, establish an intuitive vocabulary with your child. Start talking about, learn the different abilities, like the senses, the clairvoyance, clairaudience. You'll see in that blog article, mediumship, channeling, there's energy healing, premonitions, empathy, there's all different remote viewing. There's all different abilities. And the best way we can help our children, and like Crystal, you say you don't have abilities, but you're aware of these. It's like educating yourself so you can talk to your child about these things. And then they'll know. I mean, they would be able to tell you if they have a guide or not. But I think it's very fascinating that Memphis is still connecting to his past lives. And I know that Ethan had, and he had the, like I said, he had a past life regression to cut the connection. So one of the things in this stage from 3 to 5 and then from 6 to 8 is also having them set boundaries. So does Memphis, does he set clear, because this is the time you want to have kids know that they can set boundaries and tell the entities to go away, you know, to leave their space, to not bother them. This is a time that they need to learn how to surround themselves in the white light, ground their energy, and, you know, shield and protect themselves. So has that been something Memphis has been able to do?
Yes. So Memphis, when he was about 5, was the first time, we raced dirt bikes, and he came to me one night after a race, and we were in our motorhome, and he said, Mom, when I win races, I get special hugs afterwards. And I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Who's hugging you special? And he said, no, I can feel it. As I ride off the track, somebody's hugging me. And I was like, okay, all right. So, I wasn't really sure. And then right around that time, we went to Disney for the first time. And Memphis did not like Magic Kingdom. And it wasn't just that park. It was basically Disney in general. And I was like, how do you not like the happiest place on earth? And within an hour, he wanted to go home. Didn't think much of it. As he's gotten older, and as I've learned more on that he can set the boundaries, I've told him, and he does. And I make sure when things are getting, a little wonky, I'm like, have you reset your boundaries? Mm-hmm. And we've definitely learned about grounding, and we utilize that a lot. So this past March, we went back to Disney, and it was our first time going back to Disney since his first time. And I talked to him, and I felt, you feel so good that now, but you're like, darn, if I knew now what I didn't know then. Mm-hmm. So I stopped and I said to him, I said, look, you're going to experience a lot. And whenever you need to talk to me. We'll figure it out. And right around, it was in Magic Kingdom, and it was like around a certain ride. And he said, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I said, all right, come on. And it just so happened in the middle of this theme park, behind a sign, was ground. And I said, come on. And I took him behind the sign, and I said, right here, ground yourself. Take your time. Do what you need to do. Take your shoes off. Stand here. Ground yourself. And he did. And I walked away, far enough that he can do what he needs to do, but I can still watch my kid. And he was able to do it, and he was able to reset, and he was able to move forward. So it was I was so happy that he was able to communicate to me. I was able to help him with what it was we need to do, and we could move on. So even at 13, I just realized, and really this year is the first time I put 2 and 2 together. Memphis cannot or it's not he cannot. He loves dressing up for Halloween and I go all out and make his costumes. He cannot trick or treat. He does not enjoy going house to house. He wants to, but after 4 houses, he's done and he can't deal with it anymore. And I know now why he can't deal with it anymore. Well, this year's the first year he wanted to go with his friends. His friends were going on a hayride and they were going to my mom's neighborhood and everything. And I said to him, what are you going to do? And it wasn't like a mean thing, but I wanted to ask him, how are you going to handle this if it gets too much for you? And he said, well, I guess I'm going to have to ground myself. And he explained, I said, okay, great. You have a plan. Good. And my husband went and picked him up and he came home and I said, how was it? He said, it wasn't bad. And I said, did you have to ground yourself? And he said, I didn't. I said, did you skip houses? He said, what do you mean? I said, if your friends went to some houses, did you not go? And he said, yeah. He said, okay. I said, okay, well, good. I don't want him to miss out on things. He's got to learn different coping mechanisms.
And that's beautifully said, because that's exactly it for the children. And that's through every stage. Because even I love what you're saying, like with finding that place and being open to letting him ground and finding the patch of grass, because taking your shoes off and letting kids put their feet in the grass is one of the best ways to let them ground. Just having bare feet in the grass and on the ground helps to do that. But even just like with Ethan, just to share a little bit about that, because when he was in that stage of like 3 to 5, that's when he stopped being able to sleep through the night and wanting to be in his own bed, because his grandfather, my husband's father, had passed away and started showing up in his room. He started being able to sense his grandfather, and he would come in to get in our bed. And he was like, we would ask him what was going on. He's like, well, because his grandpa comes to visit him. But even before that, when he was about 2, my mother started showing up. And when he was barely talking, he went running upstairs to go to bed. And he said, we were like, why are you racing to go to bed? And he said, well, because grandma comes to play ball with me. So we were noticing then that he was sensing things. But like you, Crystal, we didn't know at that time, because my abilities were opening at the same time that Ethan's were, in a way that was just in my face. And then we'd never seen it in a child. So we didn't know how to tell him how to ground and how to do that. But it's so important once you understand it and they have these tools that they're able to do that for themselves. Even for Ethan during that time, and he's still now, a lot of these kids, he can't take crowds. Like you were saying, Disney, he will, if he's in a big place or like we took him to the convention center last year to go to Comic-Con to see one of his cousins is an artist and had comic books there, but he had to stay on the wall. He was trying to find wherever he could go to kind of be away from everything. And like you said, we don't want him to miss out, but he had to find a way to ground himself. And there's been many birthday parties that he's been invited to. We go for all of 5 or 10 minutes. And he was like, I got to go. I got to get out of here. Or he's trying to find a corner to be in. And for parents who don't understand it, it's easy, like, why can't you stay? What's going on? We would take him to different festivals and things, and he'd start screaming and crying, I got to go home. I got to go home, because everything was overwhelming to him. But once they learn those tools and techniques, and once parents are aware of them and they can ground themselves, then they can help manage themselves better. And so I think that's beautiful what you're doing with Memphis. And that's the key for parents. It's just a message. It's just to be open, talk to them. And once you establish that all of this is welcome and not weird, and that it's okay and you accept it with them, they will talk with you. And may not talk all, like, as you get into the stages of being like 12 and up, or like 9 and to 12 years old, at that age, they start trying to hide their abilities a little bit more. And
yes.
Have you noticed that with Memphis? Because at this point, like Ethan, this is a stage where they're trying so hard to fit in that they will deny their abilities and they don't want to talk about it.
We went to dinner tonight and it was an early dinner. We just happened to be hungry and went to a restaurant, and it was like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And it was just me, Memphis, and my husband. And I will randomly slip it into a conversation. Here he comes. I said, I always just say, have you seen anybody? Miss Ellen, And okay, that's fine. And he said, no. I said, okay. I said, no, as in no, or no, you don't want to talk about it. You're not going to tell me about it. He's like, I haven't seen anybody. And I was like, okay. Because my oldest son, my boys, they have different dads. Well, my twins and my oldest son have different dads. So my oldest son's grandfather passed away in June. And Memphis went to his friend's birthday party September-ish, August, somewhere, October. And it was at a restaurant, a local restaurant to us. And he texted me from there and he's like, I saw Papa, Tyler's grandfather. And I'm like, did you communicate with him? And he said, no. He's like, but he was really real. And he was like, I was just in the bathroom and I turned around and there he was. And I'm like, why didn't you try to communicate with him? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, look, he's just passed and it took a lot for him to present to you. And I said, I really need you. And I said, and then it's hard because you don't want to push him. I'm like, but look, if you see pop up again, I really need you to talk to him. I said, because he might have a message for your brother that he needs to get through that's going to help him. See, Tyler will be 16 in February, and he got his grandfather's truck. So his grandfather lived in an apartment at his dad's house. So they were very close. So I'm like, if you see Pop-Up, I really need you to find what's going on. He's like, okay, I will. And he hasn't seen him since. So, sometimes he's real eager to tell me, and other times clams up.
And we're at that same stage, because Memphis and Ethan are right around the same ages. We're at the same stage. He doesn't want to talk about it. And like you, we'll pop and ask questions. And I've asked him, are you still, I said, I know you're probably still seeing things on. He's like, yeah, but I don't want to talk about it. He's like, I don't want to use my abilities right now. So I don't want to talk about it. He's like, but they're there. And he was telling me, he's like, they're increasing, but I don't acknowledge it. And I'm like, well, it's like, you don't have to be afraid of it. And that's what, don't suppress it. Just know, you can know it's there and just, you can acknowledge it, but don't try to deny it, because it's only, this is something that he'll never, highly intuitive people, you're never going to get rid of it. You can suppress it, but it will come back out in some way or shape or form later. You'll get illness or whatever it may be by not acknowledging it and just trying to at least work with this energy around you. And so it's but I know that we, just like you, Crystal, have established that it's okay to talk about it whenever you're ready. And it's okay that we'll work through it together. And I think one of the biggest things that for us was that we were telling Ethan for so long before we were on the Psychic Kids shows not to talk about his abilities, because we didn't want him talking about it outside of the house, because we didn't know how people would take it or understand it. And so we were like, keep it quiet. But it was so much a part of him. And young kids, it's second nature to them. He wanted to talk about it. He would go to school at 8 years old, and he would tell the kids, he would come home frustrated because he would say, Mom, I was trying to explain to the kids at school that we're multidimensional beings. And I'm like, sweetie, you can't say that, because 8, 9-year-olds, they don't understand what that means. You can come home and talk to us about it. But it was trying to get him to see, like, not everybody thinks and talks in that way. But for us trying to protect him, he started taking it the wrong way, and he started taking it as something was wrong with him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he internalized it that way. We're like, no, nothing's wrong with you. It's just we were trying to protect you from others. So what we had to do was just kind of reshape our thinking and we made it fine for him to talk about it at home. But we were like, you know what? If he wants to talk about it out with others, it's okay. We just had to teach him, you have to know when you can talk about it and who you can talk about it with, but just to embrace it and be you. And we're at a point now, you just have to be authentically you. And if other people don't understand it, it's okay.
Yes.
But just, you have to be open that if kids or even adults make comments that are not, out of them not being aware, don't let it hurt your feelings. It's just, it is, they just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, Memphis did that. So my mom's house, he came to me one time and he said, Gamma's house, I don't like the energy there. Can I take the sage to Sage her house? I said, you absolutely can. And he had called my mom to come get him. And here he comes through. He's got the shell, he's got the stick, and he's going and he puts it in a Ziploc bag. My mom's like, oh, and I'm like, let it go, let it happen. And she's like, okay, fine, whatever. So apparently he took it there, but he didn't do it when he got there. And he went off and played with his friends. Now his friends were very good friends with the parents. And my husband sees them a couple weeks ago, or a couple weeks after that, excuse me. And they're telling him, like, Memphis said he had to go sage his grandma's house because the energy was bad. And my husband's like, oh my God. He's like, these kids and this other dad are just not understanding what, Memphis is actually doing. And to us, it just seems second nature. Like, oh, all right, cool. You have to do that. And you're asking Memphis, like, hey, what were you telling your friends? He's like, well, I told him I'm a medium and I can do, X, Y, Z. And I'm like, just be careful, buddy. Not everybody's going to understand what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And that's the important part, is just getting them to understand that you can tell, you just have to discern who you can tell and who you can't, and when's the appropriate time, especially with them being kids.
Yes.
Take it a little differently, but with kids. But I think it's really the way you and your husband are handling it, like how my husband, it's a healthy way for them to be able to embrace their abilities and to be able to work with it. Because one of the things, kids can have multiple abilities. So, and I'm glad you said Memphis is saying I'm a medium. So he's embracing who he is and not trying to hide it. Have you found that he has he has multiple abilities?
He has all kinds of stuff. He has stuff that I didn't know he could do. Him and Ethan did that one task with Luann where they were able to draw information from an object. And I was like, oh,
Psychometry.
okay. He astral travels. He's had an instance where it scared him because he struggled to get back after traveling.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, let's not do that. And take a break from traveling. I think he does so much that it's so normal and that I'm not aware of everything he can do.
Well, and that was us too. When we ended up on the Psychic Kids show, we found Ethan can do multiple things that we weren't even aware. We were like, wow, when they helped to assess, because the same thing, he does astral travel, he can do the mediumship, he can do intuitive stuff. He actually does something called lucid dreaming. He has that ability too. And then they were working with him with psychometry. So a lot of kids at this age, when they hold on, to their ability, they're highly intuitive, they do have multiple abilities. And that's something that parents need to be aware of as well, is like when you learn about this and understand they can have more than one. Some kids may just have one, some can have more than one. So by talking to them and letting them express all the different experiences that they're having, then you can start to determine what gifts they have and how to work with it. And like you say that you're not intuitive, I'm sure you probably are on some level, Crystal.
And it's gotten more and more and more and more. It is. And actually, so Presley and I went to Salem, and my other two children have always just, Memphis is weird. It's so weird, oh my God. And we were in Salem and we went to do broom making. You go, you make your own broom. And it was something we had really, really looked forward to. And she was her whole demeanor changed. When we got there, everything was weird. I was like, what is wrong with you? And she was frustrated. She's like, I just can't do this. And we weren't even actually doing anything yet. And then finally we were going through the shops and she stops and she was like, I don't like the way this makes me feel. I have a headache. Can we leave? And I said, yeah, let's go. And she said, that's how I felt making the broom. And I said, I think you need to start listening to yourself a little more. I said, sis, something's talking to you. Listen, if you didn't like the energy somewhere, and she's like, well, it gave me a headache and I didn't. I'm like, just listen, sis, pay attention. She was like, okay, all right. And she was really, really open. So.
Well, see, that's it, because with Memphis having abilities, and you recognize that in him young, it's possible the other children could, that it may not come out until late, older.
Mhm.
It may start pronouncing itself more at a older age. And that's just something for parents to be aware of too. And talking just like you did, or telling her to be aware. That's wonderful, because that will help her to tune into herself. And her abilities may just start coming in a different way.
Mhm.
And more, and she'll know how to handle it because of how you talk to Memphis about surrounding and grounding and shielding himself and all of that. So parents just need to pay attention, because some kids have it very strongly from the time they're very young, could be 2 and 3, and they hold on to it the whole time. Some kids, it may actually start to come in a little later. And then sometimes when it turns on, you can have multiple abilities turn on at one time, and it can be real fast.
And it seems to be almost any age. My husband, who he's had a couple experiences, and I think he definitely had to have them to be able to understand Memphis. It was just last week, and he was sitting at the dining room table, and he stopped and he kept looking, and he said, "I keep seeing something go by." And I said, he's opening the sliding glass door and he's looking out and he's like, "Nothing's here." And I'm like, okay, you can't, I hear you. And he just looked at me, and I let it go. He goes out in the garage to do something. Maybe 5 minutes later, he comes back in, he stops, and we live on 2 acres. Nothing's really close. And he stops and he looks at me. He's like, "There's cigarette smoke in the garage." And I'm like, "I bet so." Like, so he's like, "I know, I get it. Okay."
I was going to ask you, because I figured one of you is sensitive to and has some form of, I know you say everybody's got it to some degree, but
Mhm.
I was going to ask if it was you or your husband, or who did you know in your family somewhere that has that.
It's definitely so. My mother-in-law claims all kinds of stuff, but I don't know. We've never gone really deep to talk about it. I know my grandmother had abilities, and I talked to her about it back in September, actually, because she's always been able to tell what you're having, if a boy or girl, to the point to where I was told the twins were 2 boys at first, and she said, "They're absolutely not. I see pink. There's a girl." Um, and she used to be able to predict earthquakes. And she was telling me about this, and she's like, "I can't do it anymore." But with that, she also associates it negatively, and tries to relate it to the Bible and it to the devil. And I think she's shut herself out because she thinks it's evil.
Right, right. And people sometimes they don't understand that, especially when they're coming from a religion standpoint. Not every religion is understanding or accepting of these types of abilities, and not just religion, just some people in general just don't believe in, and they can associate it negatively. When in reality, it's not a negative thing at all. It's really just, it's an ability, it's a trait, it's a gift that some people have, and to be able to use it to help others in whatever ways. One of the things I always say, not everybody's meant to be a medium, but when you have this this trait of high intuition, you can use it for whatever calling, whatever vocation you go into, and use it to be the best there, because you're intuitively going to pick up what you need to do in that position or in that calling from your career. So I know, for instance, like Ethan, he's already said, "I don't want to be a medium. I don't want to do that kind of work," but he wants to be an inventor, and he's highly creative. So he's going to be able to use all of his intuitiveness into creating and designing whatever he's going to make to help change the world. And so people have to understand that's an ability that you can use it for that, but you can also use it just to be the best. Hi, Memphis, and whatever
Hi.
how are you, sweetie?
Good.
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to you too.
We're just talking about all of this, using our abilities, and how we can work with it in different stages that we go through as children go through as they're getting older, and what they experience. So can I ask you, you mind if I ask you a question?
No.
So how's it going for you? How are you? You're 13 now. Do you feel more comfortable with your abilities and accepting of it and grounded in them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you use them? I know this past summer, Ethan was asking me about wanting to learn how to read cards and doing readings for his friends. He asks about it, and sometimes he pulls back. He's like, I don't want to be different from everybody else. I don't want to use it still right now. But so for you, where are you with it? Do you just use it for yourself, or you don't want to talk about it too much, or because
I usually don't talk about it a whole lot, and I usually use it for myself.
yeah, that's Ethan too, because you guys are at that stage of that 13, 12, 13, that preteen stage where it's just, but at this point too, Crystal, because like when they're hitting this stage where hormones start kicking, and that's another thing that can also, it amps up their abilities too. So kids can it can heighten their senses and things as well. So from like 13 to 15, they pretty much can do anything like an adult and intuitive can, an adult intuitive, they just don't have the experience.
Yes.
The duration, the ability to do it, but they can do healing, they can do it all. And it's just working with their abilities more. But the only thing is for parents to be aware as teens are getting older is just to make sure that, for some kids, they can start to get fascinated, just making sure what information they have access to. So they don't start getting interested in more of the cult side of things and stay more like taking them to this point. You can take them to, do you guys go to expos or workshops or anything? Do you take them to any festivals or anything like that?
So I don't. So the only time we did is the workshop that we did with you and Ethan. And originally when that was posted, I asked him, I said, this is an intuitive child workshop. Would you like to go? And he said, no, absolutely not. And I was like, okay. And I thought about it and I was like, I really want you to go. And his words was, I don't like doing it in front of people. And I said, nobody says you have to do anything. You don't even have to talk to anybody. Just sit there and be around people that can, do what you do. And he was reluctant. He was like, okay. And then when Luann called and said, everybody canceled, if Memphis still wants to come, we'd love to have y'all. And I said, okay, well, let me ask Memphis. And I called him and I said, look, Ms. Luann said it's going to be her, it's going to be Ethan, and it's going to be his mom. That's it. And he was like, yeah, I want to go then. And he was like, I actually like that. It's just going to be us. And I said, okay. So, and I feel like it just being what was it, 6 of us? He opened up a lot more than he would have if there was 5 children and their parents.
Yeah. And that was the same for Ethan. And Ethan still remember, I think that connection and having it smaller groups like that, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in their comfort level and the connecting and how they can be themselves and come out.
Well, the thing is, and I've told people, I'm like, I've never seen Memphis click with anybody, nonetheless a child, the way he clicked with Ethan. It was automatic. It was completely natural. And they didn't have to warm up. They didn't have to. It just happened. And he's never been like that. Actually, he's always been the kid who didn't really connect with anybody well. So that I'm like, that was the coolest thing for me is, from the jump, they took off.
And I think because they can read, kids who are similar and have this, they can read each other's and they know they're alike. And that's why it's so important to be connected and find groups and find ways that you can connect kids who have this ability with each other. And it was wonderful to see Ethan and Memphis together, because Ethan was telling me, it's like, he said he felt like he had known Memphis all his life. Like they just were meant to come together and be together. So it was great to see them together. And that's just the power of that, similar, minded and like energies coming together and just seeing them blossom together. It was really great.
It was, I think at the one point we were like, well, where'd the boys go? And they were upstairs and they were playing the video games. We snuck around the corner. And
That's absolutely right. So that's why that's the connections are important. And we're going to have in this group, we'll be getting more like, online, and we're going to work and get more in person. So we just connecting. So any parents out there, wherever you are, making those connections with other kids or other families that have children like you is so important, because these kids need that. They need that connection and that time together. So yeah, it's just that the stages of moving through this from young to old, as long as parents are tuned in, start early and establish a vocabulary and start working with your children early. From what you've found, Crystal, what would be, one or two or three pieces of advice from what you've gone through with Memphis and for your family with a highly intuitive child that you would offer to parents that may be listening to this recording, who there's a
Is
lot of
be
people
open.
that have never, that like you don't know, feel they don't have the ability and don't know where to start or what to do. So what would you recommend?
To be open. Don't shut down something that your child's telling you. Perfect example, Memphis told me when, hold on, the dog's drinking. Camber. He was maybe 7 when he told me, no, younger than that. First it started with the guy in his head. And I was like, what do you mean the guy in your head? He was like, the guy in my head, I hear him, he talks to me. And I'm like, there's no guy in your head. Those are your own thoughts. And I went on with that. And a couple years later, he's like, well, I hear all my thoughts at one time. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, all my thoughts happen at one time. And it was then when he said that I started adding everything up that he has told me since he was little. And I'm like, so I asked questions. I didn't lead. That's what I don't want parents to do, is ever lead. Don't say, well, do you see something? And you don't lead. Ask questions that allows your child to tell you naturally what it is they have going on. And then when you realize it, you're like, it clicks. And because of meeting with you and talking about the schools and everything like that, Memphis has a 504 plan. And his 504 plan is for his diagnosed ODD. I realize now Memphis does not have ODD. He's a highly intuitive child.
That's right.
However, there is no ICD-9 code for that to provide him his 504 plan. So I actually, at his 504 meeting last year, I asked his permission and I said, do you care if I tell them? And he said, no. I said, okay. And I did. And I told them, and one of his teachers said, everything makes sense now. And I was like, good, I'm glad. And I think it was his one teacher said, well, he's just always staring off. And I was like, finally, I was like, he is not staring off. And I explained it. And they actually told me, what was really cool is they've had another highly intuitive child before. So now after me saying, yes, this is what Memphis can do, his abilities, and this is why, they're like, yeah, we've seen it before. And I'm like, they're like, thank you so much for actually sharing that with us.
Well, I'm so happy you said that, because that's the key, is like the conversations and getting people to understand, because we did the same thing. After we were on the show, we went in and we started telling the teachers, we were like, he's intuitive and empathic, and this is what it means, because they would say the same thing. Ethan is staring off, or he sits at the back of the room. They're thinking like he's being antisocial. It's like, no, the energy in the room is too much, and he needs to sometimes be on the, out on the side, or so. And the more we started talking about it, we actually found out that there were other, I'll say, we found out there were teachers at the school who actually said, we're intuitive. We found 2 of them that did that, but they hadn't told anybody, and that was fine. But it's like, it started the conversation, and it started being like, oh, like you said, light bulbs going off. So if parents can, and their school is open to it, I think that's a conversation to start, because then people will start understanding why these kids may act a little different, and then it's not as strange. Or sometimes, like what you said, Crystal, it's not always a diagnosis like gets labeled on them, because people don't understand the signs of a highly intuitive child. That's great that you all did that.
Yes, I did. And I think actually Memphis, where, how'd you meet that little girl from school? There's a girl. Oh, in summer school. And what was she doing that you picked up on?
I don't know.
She was staring and talking to somebody?
Yeah.
Fine.
But she didn't even try to hide it.
Memphis.
She was just like talking under her breath.
She was talking under her breath?
Yeah.
And what did you say to her?
I was like, what are you doing? She was like, I'm talking. I'm like, no, you're not. She told me she could see spirits.
She could see spirits?
Yeah.
Now, could you see what she was seeing?
No.
No.
And she wouldn't do it in her head, but she wouldn't actually say the words. She would just mouth them.
You do that.
Yeah, but I don't actually, like, I do it, my lips move. I don't actually.
That's the same thing as
say
mouthing
it.
it.
My voice.
Wait. Your lips moving, saying
My lips
something.
like move like this.
I know. Camber, please.
And
Camber, please. So Memphis will. He talks, and then please stop that dog from drinking. I can't stand that sound. It drives me crazy. Have you ever seen the show Modern Family? No, In the Middle. The Middle.
You know, I haven't watched that.
Okay, so they have a kid. His name's Brick, and every time he talks, say he was like, "It was funny." He goes, "It was funny." So jokingly, I call him Brick because he'll talk, and then he will mouth what he said just to himself. So you'll see his lips moving after he talks. And he said that's something he noticed that little girl was doing at school.
yeah, but I don't actually. My lips don't move as much, and she didn't say anything before she did it.
Oh, maybe just ask you.
Did she open up to you, Memphis? Did she start after that? Did she talk to you anymore about what she was experiencing?
No, I told her I could do the same thing, and she didn't believe me.
Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Okay.
She didn't believe me.
She didn't believe you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Does she go to your school?
She goes to Silversville.
Oh, okay. So it was other schools met at one school for summer school classes. So he doesn't see her. He will in high school next year. But yeah, because he thought he came home. He's like, he seemed very concerned with how she was just openly, very open about it. And he was like,
crazy.
Everybody thought she was crazy.
Right. And see, that's it's some of these kids, it's just such a part of them, and they can't hide it. And then other people do think there's something weird about them. And sometimes that's what leads to some of these kids being bullied and experiencing, because that happens because other kids don't understand that they're experiencing things in a different way, but that there's nothing wrong with them. They're just having a different experience. So that's what parents have to look for and advocate for, because that's really important. So, wow. Well, so Memphis, what would you like to share? We're recording this. What would you like to share with parents or, anyone about your experience as a highly intuitive child? What would you like adults to know? One or two things that you think would be helpful for them to understand about a highly intuitive child.
Maybe that the parents might not understand what the kid tells them.
Yeah.
How should a child deal with that? If their parents not understanding, what's the best way? If you're not sure, that's fine. Because you haven't had to.
What has helped you with your mom? Your mom is very open with you. What has been helpful for you with your parents?
Probably when my mom would ask other mediums. So she would talk to other mediums to get a different point of view.
Yeah, and that that's very important for parents to know too, is to reach out to others. If you don't understand and you don't know what to do, you have people like in this group, you know, there's other mediums. Reach out to somebody who is an intuitive that you can talk to, that can help you, because that's very important. And then you can work through.
Well, there are times that it gets scary, and was times when I reached out. We moved into a new house. It's a brand new house. We built it. The spirits, the souls, it's not the dwelling, it's the land, it's everything. It's something you brought into the house. It can be anything. And Memphis came to me about somebody he called the screaming lady. And he said, I hear her and she's screaming. And he said, she sounds like she's slowly dying. And I didn't know what.
Like she was screaming something in a different language.
Oh, screaming in a different language.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to do for him. Of course, when he's always welcome to come sleep with us, whatever makes you feel safer. And he said, I could hear her in my sleep. I could hear her in my dreams. She couldn't go away. And I was like, what do I do? And I reached out to Luann again. I'm like, okay, what do I do here? And it stopped. Went on for a couple of days. It stopped. He heard her once or twice after that, but that I know of, he hasn't experienced her since. And yeah, but we also found out that our neighborhood's built on an old farm, and they had slaves, and it was a blizzard, and there was a mother and a father, and the father, who were, the help, the father was away, and there was no heat in the house. And the mother and her 2 children were trying to make their way to the main house and froze to death in the blizzard.
Oh, wow.
Which is on our street, the area. So that's what I'm like, to me, that sounds like who the screaming lady might be.
Right.
Like, real loud on this. Turn that off.
Wow.
He's going the dog bowl. Just wait.
And see, that's good for parents to know too, is do some research. If your child is telling you something, or even if they're making predictions about things that come true, keep a notebook of their experiences and write down, because you can help to either prove the accuracy of what they're saying or not, or research and find out, like you said, about the scream. You found out that your property had some, slaves that died there, some energies that had an traumatic experience there. Do your research, because you may find out that what your child is actually, there's some validity to what's going on. So the main thing is for parents not to automatically discount what their child is experiencing. Listen to them, be open to it, seek outside help if you need to, from an intuitive. You have this group, you've got a lot of people in this group, others that you may know. Reach out to folks, but just be open and accepting of your child and willing to listen to their experiences.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. And it's, they're never too little to listen to them.
Yeah.
Even if it sounds far-fetched and crazy, write it down.
That's it. And they're not too young to start the conversations either about what they're experiencing. If you start, like you said, you put things together. We started putting things together for Ethan too. And it's the younger, it's just like since kids are so open from 0 to 7, it's not until they get in school and then they start learning the left brain, the logic, the ABCs, that it starts shutting down some kids' abilities. Some kids just naturally stay open, but just know that, start those conversations about how to ground themselves, how to balance their energy out, how to protect themselves intuitively, because kids are wide open, they're sponges. And so teach them those things early on, and just movement and things that help to ground them. Walking in the grass, like you said, Crystal, with no shoes on, that's a very grounding thing.
What's your favorite method of grounding? Because I'm going to tell you what it is after you tell me what it is, because I don't think you realize what it is.
I don't know. Walking through the grass?
No, it's baths. Hot baths.
Yes. Water.
Memphis.
Got a hot tub that would be great. He takes the baths. There's at least once a day in addition to a shower, but at least once, normally 2 times in addition to a shower a day, that if I know when he's experiencing something, energy's off, something's different, because he's like, can I take a bath? Can I take a bath? And he just came out. So since we've been on, he's gone, he's taken a bath, and that's where he came from when he came. His hair's still wet back here just from.
I like that, Memphis, because you know what? I have to be honest, that's one of the things I like to do too, is water. I always have to take hot showers, just like it washes and cleanses everything away. So water for me is very
Me too.
cleansing and grounding. So that's
Yes.
great to hear, Memphis, that you know that for yourself. And that's
I don't think he realized it, but
that's another tip for parents too, is water and all of that is very calming and grounding and cleansing.
we found out that this is something, and I'm not sure a lot of people can do this, and some people might find it weird, but it's something I've done since a child, and I'm small, but when you're taking a really hot bath and you're grounding yourself, and you can completely go underwater and yet you can still breathe, so it's just like this much that is exposed. It is the most calming feeling and grounding ever. And I mentioned this to my husband, I think like last week, and he was like, "Do what?" And Memphis was like, "It's awesome." And I was like, "See, somebody
great.
gets it."
That's great. That's great. Well, I know we've hit just about an hour. I was going to say one of the things for just as they're getting older, like we started taking Ethan to like those festivals, and we've been doing that periodically throughout time anyway, but just he loves crystals and gems and stones. He just gotten a huge connection to that. But doing like getting books, like now's the time even for having some metaphysical books around that they can read. I've started doing that for Ethan, that he can read on his own. I don't push him, don't pressure him, but just leaving good information around that, as start looking at it, start exploring it, so that he knows, what if he doesn't always want to talk to us, because as they get older, parents, they're not necessarily going to want to talk to their parents, but we know he has good information and connection resources to talk to. That's going to help him, so he stays focused on the right way of explaining things, talking about things, and how he's experiencing things.
Yes,
So
I agree.
wow. So I think this has been a really good conversation. I think
It has. We haven't been. I haven't been able to join the groups. We were racing, and I work in elections, and I've been very, very busy. And I saw this one. I knew what time it was going to be, and I was like, oh, perfect. And I forgot all about it. And I actually was taking a late afternoon nap, and I woke up and looked at my phone. And it was like reminder, and it was like 6:55, and I was like, I'm getting on. Finally, I'm able to get on.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you were able to, and I'm glad. Thank you, Memphis, for coming in and talking and sharing some of your thoughts, because I think it's important for parents to hear this, and the adults that are going to listen to this and hear some of the experiences that you shared. That's really helpful.
What we're doing is Ms. Ellen has created a group for parents to meet up for their intuitive children. So she does these online meetups where we can discuss what we've experienced with our children, and she records it so other parents can listen and hopefully help their children.
They get tidbits information. But stay tuned, Memphis, because we're going to have meetups for kids too. That's coming, so that you can get together, like you and Ethan and others can come together and just talk and connect, and and that would be good for you all to be able to just have conversations like this too, and not just about your village. You can just talk about anything, because it's fun just to connect in general. Yes. And that helps with just overall. So thank you both for this.
Thank you.
This has been great, and it's great to see you, Memphis, and great to see you, Crystal.
It's good seeing you.
Yeah, so this is great. So we'll post this up, and I'm sure people will get a lot of benefit out of hearing our conversation.
I hope so.
So I'm gonna stop it right here.